Welcome to AmusementSparks. This is the amateur theme park design show, and we've got some very special guests on today's episode. These guys actually do a couple podcasts of their own, and one of them specifically led me directly to the creation of this show. So it's a big honor, getting your heroes on the show. So who do I have here on the call?
First of all, thank you for saying that. That's such a huge honor to hear you say that, and we're big fans of your show, and to hear that our show influenced this is pretty crazy. But hi, my name is Will Dodson. I'm a composer for film, television, media. I'm also the senior producer and co-founder of SideshowSoundTheatre.com, along with my compadre Wendell here.
Yeah, and I am, as he says, Wendell. I'm Wendell Jones. I am the other co-founder of Sideshow. We both produce the podcast Sideshow Sound Radio, all about film scores, TV soundtracks, video game music, Disney music. We have a few shows on there, of which Andrew just mentioned, Mouse Music, all about Disney music soundtracks. And we're so happy to be here. Thank you for having us, Andrew. It's our honor.
Yeah, sure. And another a question I usually ask my guests right towards the beginning is what do you guys do professionally? You did a great job of handling that, and you guys have some pretty interesting careers. It's not every day that you meet someone with your profession.
Yeah, they're fun. They're stressful at times, but they're fun careers. We just basically my career is anything audio. I'm a like I said, a film, television, and media composer, but I also dabble in audio editing and things like that. So it's a fun field, and Wendell's is pretty much as varied as mine is. I think, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I left university to pursue a composing career, and well, I'm still here.
Well, if we'd like to get right into it, we've got our first segment, our warm-up segment here called the Toynado. I've got a list of toy-related adjectives and a list of types of toys. If you can't tell, I used to work in the toy industry, and I'm a huge fan. And I'm using a random.org random number generator here, and our first pairing doesn't seem that crazy. It is a superhero robot. You guys have any ideas of a pitch on what we could do with a superhero robot?
Ooh. Superhero robot.
I know, it's almost like not challenging enough to be
I know.
thought-provoking.
It kind of writes itself, doesn't it?
Yeah. I guess, the power of flight is always one that is fascinating to people, like kind of wish fulfillment, like what if I could fly,
Yeah.
So doing, kind of like a drone type of thing would be kind of cool if it, had its arms and legs outstretched and then there were like rotors on top of the, fists and the feet.
That'd be
not
awesome.
Super imaginative.
Yeah, no. I think that's coming. I think that kind of thing is coming.
Mm-hmm.
Drones already becoming so big. I think they haven't quite handled it quite yet. Like with Amazon using drones, it's like, well, someone could just like shoot that drone down and get a new iPod or whatever. iPod. That shows how old I am.
Are you proposing they have defensive weaponry on the Amazon drones?
For me, yes. I mean, honestly, it's getting that way. But no, that'd be cool. Superhero robot, awesome. I would love the idea of it being like my size, like made to measure, so I can use it myself. I don't know what my dog would make of that though. That would drive pets crazy.
No kidding. Yeah,
would it move
crazy.
it away from the kid-friendly angle if it was maybe an asteroid defense robot?
Whoa. So is it like a military thing? Like
maybe a military grade sort of, like, I don't know exactly. I mean, the physics behind deflecting an asteroid are crazy, obviously.
Yeah, but somebody's working on it, though.
Somebody's working. Let's hope. Let's hope so.
That sounds
maybe that's
cool.
its superpower.
Right. This might be kind of interesting in like the Cold War era. If suddenly the Russians have what looks like on our radar, it looks like a flying man, and he is flying into space. They're sending like a single human into space without a spaceship. Like, turns out it actually is just a small spaceship that looks like a human, but it'd be a pretty good like way to terrify your enemies. Like, they have superheroes now. Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole franchise in itself. Well, that's Iron Man.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly what I was thinking. Iron Man, yeah.
That is Iron Man. Well said. Okay, that one's already taken. Maybe we should come up with a different one. I was trying to think of how we could do like a Spider-Man type web slinging robot, and I'm like, that's just going to be a disaster because your reaction time would have to be so quick if it's like remote controlled or something. You have to target what you're going to shoot the webbing at. I don't know how Spider-Man does it. It seems like a job in and of itself. Like, it would use up so much of your brain to figure out, okay, what momentum do I have? What's my trajectory? You know, what surface could I stick to where I'm going to be able to turn the way I want to go? Man, a true hero.
Yeah, that is math on the go.
Well, yeah, so that one was almost too simple, right? It was like kind of a boring idea because it's like, well, yeah, superhero robot, you know, that probably exists out there already. But the next one that's coming up here, let's see if we can get something a little bit more fun. Okay, this one, I almost just hit the re-randomize button, but I'm not going to do it. We're going to be true to form here. These are pure, unadulterated outcomes. We have a dance and move, that's the adjective, and the noun is watch. So what do you think about that, gentlemen? Yeah.
Dance and move, watch.
I got it.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, there is a vibrating mechanism within the watch that will react to whatever music it hears in the environment.
Whoa.
And on screen, on the face of the watch, it will show you which dance move you need to execute at any given moment. This would be kind of weird because you'd constantly have to be looking at your watch.
Yeah.
So your left arm or right arm, depending on which arm you wore it on, you'd have to kind of always have it up and looking at it. But it would be almost like a Dance Dance Revolution kind of deal.
Well, maybe it can be holographic. You can have a little hologram coming up.
Oh,
at the
cool.
top.
Yeah.
That sounds really neat. I like that you could use the like the sensors in the watch. You know, it can tell what position it's in, kind of like a Wii controller, and so it can tell if you're actually, you know, doing the like disco move or whatever. Like it can tell what your hands are supposed to be moving and whether you're achieving it or not. That's kind
This
of
would
fun.
be helpful for me because I cannot dance to save my life.
No, me neither. Two white guys, Jesus, yeah.
Could you imagine this as like a training thing? You know, like I'm, you know, a single guy trying to attract, you know, ladies who are interested in dancing or whatever, and it's got, you attach one watch onto, you know, each leg and each arm, and it vibrates when you're supposed to move that arm.
I seriously, I want this. Good job. Like I need this. Like I'm about to marry a Latina, so the difference between our dance moves are very different. I just don't have the hips,
fun.
you know. I need maybe something
it's
to
all in the
attach to the
hips.
hips.
Yeah,
Get my hips moving.
What a funny idea. That's really fun. You could do like maybe a little kids version where potentially, you know, the LED screen can change colors on the watch. And
nice, yeah.
Have you ever seen that? It's a certain kind of photography. I'm blanking on the name right now. Where it's long exposure photography. So
Yes.
you can like be holding a glow stick and move it in a circle, and it'll look like you have a ring of glow stick around you. That kind of thing. Yeah, that'd be really fun if you had a long exposure kind of thing. And, you know, as you're moving your arm around, the LED is changing, so you can have it, you know, kind of change colors through this like swirling pattern that you're making while you're dancing.
Nice, that's creative.
That could be kind of fun.
I like that.
Yeah, then it's
could
almost
be.
getting into like 3D like sculpting. And maybe there could be, you know, there's some kind of dance benefit from this. You know, if you learn how to draw this specific pattern with your wrist, suddenly you've got, you know, cool dance moves.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that cool to wave your arms around while you're dancing. You know, it's usually in the hips, like you said, Wendell. But you never know. Maybe there's going to be a new dance craze where it's just kind of doing the monkey, for example.
Yeah. No, well, it gets people more active at the very least, no matter how shoddy their dance moves are.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do one more here. This is... Sorry, I need to streamline this process a little bit. I have to keep switching back between tabs here. We've got LED screen transformers. What do you make of that?
LED screen
Transformers as in more than meets the eye transformers?
Yeah, they're more than meets the eye. You know, the toy that transforms it from one form into another.
Ooh, so this is basically a screen with LEDs?
Yeah, it's got to be some kind of LED screen. So it could be, you know, like a smartphone, like a, you know, smart device app, or it could be the toy itself has a screen. You know, maybe the back of it has a screen that can give you some kind of information. I don't know.
I've got it.
All right, let's hear it.
It's a specially written algorithm that allows you to take any picture of anything that you can find, and then it will transform it into a transformer in its robot form, but in a perfectly symmetrical way. So if you take a picture of a cup, it will transform into a transformer, but if you were to actually pull the cup apart, every piece would fit exactly as it shows on this robot.
So is it just one robot that can kind of reconfigure, or does it like design one from scratch?
I think it designs one from scratch. So if
That's
you were to
really
take your
cool.
phone and like say you take a picture of your cat even, it would show you how your cat would revert back to robotic form were it a transformer.
Wow, that is really cool. So it's like an augmented reality kind of thing almost.
Exactly.
You could hold it up to this specific lamp that's sitting beside me, and it could show it unfolding, and the lampshade would become the like shoulder armor, and that's really cool, dude. Wow. Do you gentlemen feel warmed up? Are you prepared to get into
totally
the
raring
main
to
course?
go? Yeah, coffee and Toynado. Yeah, I'm there. Let's do this.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Exciting stuff. Cool. So, well, the reason why we are gathered here today is, well, I mean, mutual love for podcasts and everything, but also there's a specific album that you two completed together called Greenhill Manor. Do you have anything you'd like to say about that album, an intro to kind of what it is?
Just a quick little backstory. So Wendell and I, as has been established, are composers. And in 2010, and we met each other and really kind of found that we were similar, artistically. And we got on really well, really good buddies and whatnot. Well, in 2010, I also decided that every single year I was going to write something for Halloween every year, without question, in perpetuity. It was just going to keep happening for the rest of my life. Whether that was going to be like a single piece of music or an album or whatever. So in 2010, I started that. Wendell was the first person to jump on it and go, dude, that's so cool. I really love this idea. I like your work. You seem to have this sort of affinity for creepy, fun music like I do. Not a lot of people do. I was also in a band called The Carnival. This is Wendell saying that, not me. And he showed me The Carnival, which was this really great two-piece. I always kind of describe it as Panic at the Disco meets like Danny Elfman.
It's a fair assessment.
Yeah, that's a good description.
Yeah, and I really loved it. I loved it, and I was like, this is so cool. So then in 2011, I actually released an album called Three Tales of the Macabre, which was a really short punk rock length 9-minute EP of three sort of different stories told within just a quick time frame. At that point, Wendell got on board with that and said, dude, that's so cool. I love this album. Would you want to do this with me next year? And I was like, yes, that sounds like a lot of fun. So in 2012, we released our first album, which was called Twisted Tales and Scary Stories. In 2013, we released our follow-up, the WTF Paranormal Agency. And in 2014, we released Greenhill Manor, which is the album we're basing our theme park off of today. And we essentially began creating this mythical place called Greenhill Point, where crazy stuff just seems to happen around Halloween or on Halloween throughout its history. And each album is a chapter in the history of Greenhill Point. And the idea behind it was, because Greenhill Point had become such a tourist hotspot for people on Halloween, one of the residents of Greenhill Point decided to capitalize on this and build a theme park where every day was Halloween and see if he could make some money doing it. And he was a wealthy billionaire named Carl Ellersby, and that's our third album. We take you there via audio on our third album.
Yeah, and it's an awesome album. It's a great listen. It's really good for that kind of Halloween kind of creepy vibe without being too scary. It's not like a horror film soundtrack or anything. Like you said, it's kind of like fun Halloween music. It's the bright side of Halloween. If someone was interested in this album, where might they find it?
Yeah, you can head to our website, sideshowsoundtheatre.com. You can find all the links to our albums there. You can also stream them. And then if you want to head straight to our Bandcamp page, sideshowsoundtheatre.bandcamp.com. That's theatre spelt the British way with R-E at the end. And yeah, we invite you to do so. Actually, right now, we still have a 50% discount on all our albums going on. So if you want to buy a whole discography, that's 5 albums and 1 Christmas single, you can do that for, I think, around about $19. So yeah, do it. It's worth it.
Yeah, that's a great value. It's really great music. And
Thank you, man.
Having listened to you guys kind of analyze film scores and TV scores and theme park scores even, really, I definitely value as like experts in the field. But then when I finally like started listening to your music that you've created either in the past or at your present status, it's like, it's awesome. It's like, man, these guys can't just talk the talk. They can also walk the walk. the first track is called The Grand Reopening, and this, just the name itself is captivating. You know, you hear grand opening, that's a nice phrase that we use all the time, but reopening, what does that mean exactly? Where does the re come from?
Pray tell, Master
Shall
William.
Oh, okay. So I'll explain. Okay. All right. So part of the mythos involving this park is that, well, first of all, it was built in 1954 by as I said, Carl Ellersby, and it operated for a really long period of time. It was a huge hit in Greenhill Point. But in 2009, they actually debuted a new attraction, which we'll get to towards the end of this, called Off the Rails. And it was sort of the big, new high-tech thing, a thrill attraction that would blow everybody's mind. Well, when they were soft previewing it in 2009, 5 people actually disappeared while riding it. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, so they if you're viewing this from the CCTV cameras that the ride operators would see, you would see the ride vehicle entering a tunnel where the cameras couldn't go, and when the vehicle emerged 2.5 seconds later, the passengers were gone without a trace. And so, understandably, this led to the park's closure, safety investigations, police investigations, and the park was found not to be at fault because there was never any trace of these people ever having existed in the first place. So the park reopens at the beginning of our album in 2014, and the album, I should also mention, is a mix of diegetic and non-diegetic. So the majority of what you hear is in-world, but there are certain aspects to the album, like this track and the last track, where it's sort of being written as an opening credit to a movie. And so this is basically the main title. And we are landing in our story the day the park reopens, essentially. So this is the grand reopening, and that's how we named it as such, or why we named it as such, I should say.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And for me, just as a listener, someone who wasn't involved in the creative process at all, I felt like the first kind of like 30 seconds, I can kind of, the sounds make me feel like there's a lot of kind of like shadows and like movement going around. And then once you get to like up to the 1 minute mark, it starts to feel like more kind of heroic and more like, it's a little bit less creepy, more comfortable. And then it starts to get a little bit, creepier, more like whimsical again around the 2 minute mark when you get to the kind of like, there's this like kind of secret passage kind of vibe about it. And I really like that. It kind of ebbs and flows as far as like, what is going on here? Okay, things are okay. Wait a minute, what's going on here? It's kind of an exciting back and forth that I really enjoy in this first track.
So cool to hear that.
So track 2 is The Park Comes to Life. And this is kind of a cool, combination of like kind of horror slash kind of Frankensteinian kind of things where things are, coming to life, animating, but also, hey, it's just someone flipped the lights on at the theme park. It's getting to be, dusk, and we got to turn the lights on to the attraction. So it's a cool, like, it's a catchy title, The Park Comes to Life. I really like this one. And this song in particular really kind of set the pace for me as far as what to expect from the album. I really loved that. Was there anything you had in mind in particular when you were coming up with this track?
Yes, actually. I'm so glad that you mentioned lights coming on, because that is... this is a track that I specifically wrote, and our writing process is all over the place. Wendell wrote a good portion of the track we just talked about, but then I took this track. So with this track, what I was imagining as I was writing the music was, lights kind of turning on in various points synchronized with the music. So if you were standing on the main street looking down towards the end of the park, lights would be kind of coming on, from 100 feet away, from 10 feet away, just as the music kind of ebbs and flows. And this is actually a nightly event, as you said, when the sun goes down. The whole park is dark, and the lights start coming on, and the park comes to life. And it's meant to evoke that sort of feeling of faux magic, if you like. It's obviously a production, but it's meant to be sort of supernatural in the way they present it in the park. And And I'm so glad that you picked up on the light because I've always wondered if that played.
That was the vibe I got from it. Definitely, I got this kind of, Luigi's Mansion kind of Danny Elfman, like this kind of pulls influence from things I truly love and kind of puts it into a specific location. I really like that. I feel like so many albums aren't designed with a location in mind. It's kind of an unusual thing, but it really adds a certain, connective tissue between all the tracks, and I thought that was really cool. But so us being here, designing a theme park together, it's kind of like we are taking this park that you guys designed and like bringing it to life, kind of trying to enhance it in any way that we can or build it up a little bit more. And so, this track kind of echoes that sentiment. The park comes to life.
It's funny that we both have different ideas, but the same ideas. Obviously, when we write these tracks, we envision a story that we've constructed together in our heads, and at the same time to hear your take on it, that's exactly the same. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome.
I think it's true. It's like a very blossoming track.
So basically, we've just walked into the park so far. We've seen the lights come on, and then we get to track 3, which is Creepy Carousel. I kind of got some sort of circus kind of parade type of vibes off this one. It felt almost like cartoony, like kind of circus music. How it's really up tempo and kind of like the theme of this show. Actually, the AmusementSparks theme. I wanted it to sound kind of like old-timey amusement park, kind of like a circus or a parade, this kind of vibe.
This is not your mommy and daddy's carousel at all. Not at all. I mean, the clue's right there in the title. Yeah, I came to Will with this track because we love alliteration at Sideshow, if it wasn't obvious. It is all over everything we do. But I was so inspired, both of us, in fact, by the musical, the Carousel musical by Hammerstein, Oscar Hammerstein. That whole piece of music that Rogers wrote for that film, it was so breathtaking. It's one of my favorite pieces of music, and a lot of this track was kind of designed around the structure of that track, at least for the first half. So with this carousel, the way I envisioned it is not necessarily outside, but internal, inside a building. I wanted it to be, very kind of black and dark, and again, not to quote Harry Potter too much, but that kind of bewitched ceiling above. So the difference is that at some point during the ride, during the most scarier moments, while you are on this carousel, I mean, these are no Prince Charming horses. These are black horses with red eyes. And I imagined, smoke coming from their nostrils and things like this. And then I imagined that at some point during the ride, the carousel opens, kind of blossoms out, and moves you. So the whole carousel moves itself through this ride. And it's more kind of dark and enchanting and kind of, very... very sinister, like all Sideshow theme park attractions should be.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love kind of reimagining this, just classic theme park attraction as a new way, where you can change the vibe of it and make it start moving around. When you sit down on one of those horses, you're not expecting the whole carousel to kind of get up and move around, but it totally could. That'd be awesome, especially if the queue area is not within view of the attraction, so you don't see the previous people riding it, where it comes up and kind of comes to life and moves around. Right. That'd be, oh man, I'm getting giddy. That's really fun.
Well, one of the inspirations for the actual ride system, actually, if I can get technical and weird for a second.
Please do. Yes.
This is the show to do it.
Yeah, this is true. I don't get I'll never have this opportunity again, probably. So we actually we had conversations before we even wrote a note of this album about the rides and what would happen on these rides and what kind of technology you could use for these rides and all sorts of things. So the inspiration, as I understand it, and Wendell, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, because
I will.
This was a track that you started. Because as is our practice, we will often oftentimes appear together on the same track. So in this track, I believe Wendell takes the first half, I take the second half.
That's true.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Am I right
Absolutely.
about that? Okay. The ride system for Twilight Zone Tower of Terror has always really intrigued me. And what's great about that is it's I believe it's called Fly-by-Wire. I'm probably so wrong, and one of your listeners will probably be writing an angry tweet at me right now. But there's basically the way that ride works is there's a line of sensors under the floor, and the actual ride vehicle itself can move through the space 3-dimensionally without being tethered to anything, because it's basically just being guided, through radio waves,
Wow.
with these sensors on the floor. I've always imagined that this carousel that you ride, this ride vehicle, is in itself an actual carousel within a show building.
Cool.
But it actually goes through a physical space. It actually changes scenery and projections and stuff like that. So it's dynamic in that way.
That's great. That was actually one of the notes I had written down for this song is, maybe towards the end or the second half, it kind of seems to kind of go back and forth between this kind of dark and light kind of tonality where it seems to go, like in my imagination when I was just listening to this, just walking around, I imagined it kind of going from a public kind of tone to like a more private, more personal kind of thing. So it kind of switches back and forth between these two modes. And I thought it'd be kind of cool if, what my original idea was just to have half of the ride, half the carousel being in darkness and half of it being in light. So you're going, into the darkness, like by yourself, a little bit spookier, but then you can come outside and you can see other people around. Oh, hey, it's just a theme park, nothing too crazy here. But if it's indoors though, I mean, you can really, turn it up to 11 a little bit, like change it so that every time you go around, it's a totally different experience with it. There could be projections on the walls. You could change all the way that the lighting works. Even the eye color of the horses could change. All of a sudden.
Totally.
You could have it.
Something that would play to that, and that's a great idea. We're so doing that, Will. Write that down. The beauty of this attraction is that, carousels, by their very nature, will always have music as part of the ride. So, when I was envisioning this, it had to have that kind of, that theater organ, that circus sound, those kind of old barrel organs that play by themselves. It had to have that sound, so that's what we were going for. But the way I envisioned it, and it's an interesting fact about carousels because we have a lot of them back in England. I haven't seen any in Mexico. Get on that, Mexico, seriously. But back in England, we call them kind of merry-go-rounds, which is funny in itself because the first word is merry. But
that's so British.
The merry-go-rounds in the UK always turn clockwise. The merry-go-rounds or the carousels in North America always go anti-clockwise. What I would like to do on our ride is to go both ways in the same way that the best kind of attractions do, how they will start going one way and then suddenly switch and go the other, and then we're back again, and just constantly switching with the music. That's how I imagine it. So it's not a pleasant, maybe it starts off pleasantly going round in a circle like any other attraction, like you said, and people outside can kind of view in through the windows, or the ride itself comes out in exterior moments, But I think that as the ride develops, it starts twisting and turning and really making you feel sick again, which is what every sideshow attraction should do.
That sounds awesome. And if we want to kind of switch from being like in the public to this kind of enclosed room where we can do all kinds of crazy effects, it'd be kind of neat if the actual carousel is above ground, and then as it starts going, it starts like maybe slowly descending underground. And then you have this underground area where you can kind of swing the attraction around and go through all the different effects. And the people watching are just like, oh, it just kind of goes down underground and then it comes back up. But then of course there'd be like the screams of the people on the ride coming up. It'd be really fun.
I never thought of that before.
That's
I
cool.
love that idea actually, because you managed to take it from being already super dynamic to being more dynamic because you're going outside now.
There's a lot of possibilities with this carousel. Seriously.
As far as the track listing, this is where it kind of starts to get a little bit operatic, and you can kind of feel like there's a story here. And I think that you could definitely tell a bit of a story, or kind of the way that Disney attractions do it, where there's not really a clear-cut story, but there's certain characters and there's like a basic plot arc. Just kind of introducing characters would be pretty straightforward, and we can have them kind of make cameos throughout the park. And I think that the return visitors would really get a kick out of finding these hidden pieces of story that are kind of woven in between the rides. And It'd be kind of cool. Maybe it could incorporate some of the story elements of like those people who disappeared off of the ride. Like were they ghosts or like where did they go? And you could kind of include certain things like that. Like maybe there's I don't know. This kind of seems a little bit goofy, but maybe there's a person on the carousel who is someone who actually works for the park, and once it starts to descend and kind of get a little bit crazy, their horse just kind of like jumps off the ride, and like that person's just gone, and everyone's like, this guy was sitting next to me on this attraction and he's gone
awesome.
Now. Just really disorient people.
Man.
If the going underground and the whole thing moving, and then also the horses changing directions or whatever, that's not disorienting enough. We can actually have people disappear off the ride as you're on it.
That's amazing.
Oh, that is the cool. I'm not just saying that because I'm a guest on your show. That is such a rad idea. Having like a sort of undercover cast.
It's like the Rebel Spy on
just,
Star Tours, right?
Yeah, but way better, way better.
The next track here, number 4, is Mountains of the Macabre. And so for this one, it kind of, what's the name of the song? It's Hall of the Mountain King, I think. Is that the name of that track? The song, a famous piece. That's one of my favorite pieces of like classical music. And I got certain little notes of that where there's these kind of like almost mischievous little like kind of footstep type of sounds. Like it's a really cool vibe for me. It's hard for me to describe because it's something I've loved that song since I first heard it when I was 4 or 5, and there's something fascinating about it, and I think that Mountains of the Macabre gets a kind of similar vibe to it.
This is one that I started. This is, in fact, I should preface this by saying one thing that Wendell and I try to do at least once on every album is have a track where we have a musical conversation between one another, where one guy will start a phrase and the next guy will then come in and respond to the phrase, and then the other guy will come back and respond to that phrase, and on and on and on it goes. It's something that hopefully no one notices, but it's something that's like kind of really important to us. So
yeah, that sounds really fun to write too.
It's amazing.
Oh, it is.
There are
It's so
sections
fun
in
to
this
write.
track where there is literally 2 seconds of my music, and then it goes back to Will for 2 seconds, and then back to me. And I mean 2 seconds. It's really small.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot of fun to write like that. I really enjoy it. But this is actually, so this is an idea that I started. And yeah, it's funny. Hall of the Mountain King was an influence on this, specifically the tiptoeing kind of nature of it. But this is actually a walkthrough area within Greenhill Manor. And
Cool.
It's basically just a place where, the restroom is. There's gift shops in there. There are little, food carts and things like that. But it's just these big, creepy mountains that you can walk through and kind of sit down and relax. And, every theme park needs a place like this.
Oh, absolutely.
Where, you get away from the hustle and bustle. You don't have to wait in line. You can just kind of look at stuff. There's fantastic, lighting effects on the mountains at nighttime, and just a really peaceful yet creepy place to go hang out.
That sounds peaceful yet creepy. I love that, and that's kind of the vibe that I was getting from the first couple of tracks on this album. It's like, welcome, but beware. It's comforting, but comforting in its creepiness. I think that fits in here too as well. What kind of like environment is it in Greenhill Point? Like, are there mountains? Are there a lot of mountains in this area?
I'm so glad you asked that question because Wendell and I have had many conversations about it. It is basically a seaside village a la Martha's Vineyard. Mm-hmm. That kind of place. So you would have rolling hills and things like that, but you also would have like cliff faces overlooking the ocean, and that plays very much into our very next album that we did in 2015, Thunder Bay Hotel, which takes place in a completely different section of Greenhill Point. But so this area would already have naturally occurring, hilltops and sort of rolling landscape, and the park designers would have played into that when constructing these mountains on top of them, and I kind of envision it as just, creepy dead trees and, pumpkin patches.
I love just having a rest area, and you could display the jack-o'-lanterns that people have been making, and if it's Halloween every day, you got to make fresh jack-o'-lanterns, every week.
Exactly.
So a place to display those would be awesome. You said that this area might even have some souvenir shops, including the next track here, number 5, the AmusementSparks souvenir shop. This was kind of a different, it's kind of like a break from the action of this album, in my opinion. It's up tempo, not that it's like totally relaxing, but it's got this kind of, music box feel to it. It feels like really pure and kind of hopeful and innocent. And it doesn't seem to have much creepiness at all, which is almost creepy in and of itself. It's like if you're walking through a haunted house and there's something that seems totally natural. You're like, what is that thing going to do? It's going to jump out and scare me. And then nothing happens. It's just like, it puts you on the edge of your seat for no reason. It's just a nice, up-tempo, fun music box piece of music. It's awesome.
Well, I wrote this and sent it to Wendell just to see what his reaction would be to it. And I think he was like, cool, let's put that on the album. And
yeah,
the very simple concept. I kind of feel like this is the big sort of, if you compared it to anything, it would be like the world of Disney, in downtown Disney and that kind of thing, where it's just, this is where you go to get merch,
right,
if you're at Greenhill Manor.
Yeah.
And just a big shop. And this is just the loop that plays, while you're in there.
It's an awesome song. I really like this one. At this point in the album, I was like, this is a change of pace, and I really like it. I love the sound of a music box anyway, but it's a well-written piece. It's very enjoyable. Next is Ride of the Headless Horseman. So I'm assuming that we're exiting the gift shop at this point, and we are back into the park proper. This track, I could see it on a film trailer for an action movie for sure. It's got this kind of like anti-hero, kind of gritty modern vibe to it, where it's got this sort of complex, almost like chaotic feel to it, and then it suddenly like snaps into like action and like a march almost. I really love this one. This one really gets the blood boiling. So it's really exciting to kind of have those first 4, and then you go into the music box, and then you come out with Ride of the Headless Horseman, and it's like, we're off to the races.
Basically, in this ride, you are Ichabod Crane. And you are, you start in your ride vehicle. Obviously, this isn't a show building, so you start in your ride vehicle, and you're very slowly going through Sleepy Hollow, and then, of course, as we all know, the Headless Horseman appears, and you need to escape without losing your head. And the whole point of it is to get over the bridge, because everybody knows once you cross that bridge, my friend, the ghost is through, his power ends, or whatever the saying is. And it doesn't end well for you, and that's basically the ride. So you're being chased, and just behind you, there is the horrific vision of the Headless Horseman on his steed, and they are getting closer and closer and closer to you as you move at speed, probably 30 to 40 miles an hour in your ride vehicle. So, yeah,
that's awesome.
I really wish this existed.
Yeah, and do you want it to incorporate, the like river at the end? Do you want it to somehow jump across the river or jump into it, or just kind of end right before you get to it? It kind of like you're waking up from a dream.
I like your idea. I think that adds an extra, like, especially at the end, if you can go airborne even.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool?
In some way. Oh man, like where you do your ride vehicle somehow executes like a 30-foot jump. Maybe, I mean, obviously be suspended or something, but that would be
Right.
incredible.
Yeah, that'd be really
So,
fun. You kind of escape by the skin of your teeth or whatever that expression is. Yeah, skin of your teeth. That's it.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting. It's a really fun up-tempo track, and I like the idea of it being a chase sequence. That's awesome.
Yeah.
For your version of the Headless Horseman, do you see him having a jack-o'-lantern companion, or is he just a guy with no head?
Yeah.
Yeah, the jack-o'-lantern. Because
Yeah.
when we were talking
Yeah.
about jack-o'-lanterns, and I'm just looking at the album artwork here, I was like, it'd be cool if you had kind of like jack-o'-lantern contests, and then maybe the scariest one gets to be used for the Headless Horseman's jack-o'-lantern for that day or that weekend or whatever. That'd be a pretty exciting incentive.
There it is, right there.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That is awesome. That is such a good idea. Yeah, because and then if you rode the ride knowing that that's your jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. You would
that
just
would
be
be
like
awesome.
turning around trying to take a picture of him the whole time. Like, that's my jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we'll let them take
that's such
their
a good
picture with the Headless Horseman before it decomposes or anything.
Before he kills you.
Or that. Before he kills you. Oh man, that was a good one.
This is perhaps the scariest part of the album, so it should be the same in the parks as well. I think the jack-o'-lantern idea is great. I love the idea in the Batman episode you had with Nathan and Craig of getting to meet characters or having like access to a secret menu at a restaurant because you've been loyal to the park, you've visited so many times, you've spent so
you've
much
earned it.
money. Yeah, I think with that in mind, I always like the idea, and we'll get to some restaurants in later tracks, but I always like the idea of having like maybe a hidden secret restaurant called Frank and Dine. And actually I sent many moons ago, I sent Will like the whole menu, like we have it, just a counter service restaurant. You could have instead of like coffee cream pie, you could have coffee scream pie. So many things. Like the ideas are
So many
endless.
possibilities.
This was the one painful thing about doing this album. He came up with this incredible concept for Frankenstein, and at the end of the day, we just could not find a way to make it play on the album, or we just ran out of time.
sense.
One of the two.
Right.
And it was like, but in our mind, it's still there. We just didn't do a track on it because
Well,
No,
yeah, it's a
totally.
hidden
I
attraction.
mean, he went so in depth. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it might be a bonus track on a re-release in the future. In fact, it probably should be. We should probably get on.
Yeah,
that.
oh, definitely. Yeah, there'll definitely be some kind of archive where we expand on this stuff and put out some menus and things. Why not? I would love to do that.
Attention, guests of Greenhill Manor. In just 15 minutes, the ghost train will begin boarding.
Our next stop will be track 7, Twisted Tales Tavern. I really love the title of this one, by the way, but this one is, I believe it's the first occurrence of hearing like a crowd in the track. You can hear other people visiting the park, and I think that kind of helps to ground it again. After like the thrilling chase of the ride of the Headless Horseman, it's like, okay, we're back with civilization here. We're back at a theme park again.
Yeah, that is all Will's hand as well. Like he is a mass. I mean, everyone knows anything you hear at Sideshow, pretty much 99% is Will's magical editing hands, as I'm going to call them. But he's very good at crafting these like sounds. Because when I came to this album, in trying to sell this world, what we really thought was a good idea was to just add these sounds in there. We could have gone overboard with them, but just to sell this world and story a little more, and like you say, Andrew, just ground it in a place. We felt that would really help, and certainly the next few tracks have that. So awesome, yeah. Tell us what's inside, Will. Lead us through the door.
Okay, well, this is also where I believe it was the first time in our discography where we were actually able to reference stuff from our first album. Our first album is actually called Twisted Tales and Scary Stories. And so I came to Wendell one day and I was like, what do we have? 2 restaurants. One's called the Twisted Tales Tavern and one's called the Scary Stories Saloon, which we'll get to later on in the episode, of course. What's interesting about this tavern is there is an organist and he is playing the first 3 melodies you hear on our first album.
Oh, cool.
So, and then when you get to Scary Stories Saloon, there is a pianist who is playing the last 3 melodies from that first album. So it's actually like a little Easter egg within an Easter egg there.
That's great.
So just to keep it kind of in world, you know,
Right.
and sort of keep it kind of fun and stuff. So yeah, what's happening in this restaurant is it's basically just your run-of-the-mill counter service restaurant, but it's kind of based on like a creepy forest inside. So you've got, you know, I kind of envision trees growing within the structure, and the tables are kind of part of the trees and part of the foliage, and you've got crows in the trees, and just a generally, again, peaceful but creepy vibe.
I like that. It kind of reminds me of like Rainforest Cafe if it was like Halloween themed.
Yes.
That sounds awesome. We are ready for the Ghost Train. It's a really fun track. It's, you know, kind of accelerating. It gets into some pretty intense action. And again, this one sounds like a trailer for an action movie.
I came to Will and said, you know, well, we need a ghost train, because that is always my favorite part of any theme park, especially in the UK. So, like, we need it. You know, maybe it's a little, you know, too on the nose with that title, but you know, honestly, this is exactly what you said. You know, it's about musically recreating a train, you know, and yes, we have the sound effects in there too, but just, you know, picking up the pace. And I think you have to be very clever when you have that idea. You have to approach it in a smarter way, because it's very easy to recreate a train. You know, it's very rhythmic in nature once it's going over the sleepers. You know, it's very easy to do that, but then to do it musically and not just have the percussion section taken over is difficult. So I wanted to approach it that way, but make it as musical as possible at the same time. And then, like I said, just play around with the speed and the dynamics. But I mean, this is essentially not necessarily a ride, but just taking you from one section of the park to the other. So yeah, and again, you know, Will's editing magic. Expand on that, brother. Expand on that.
I actually recorded audio of trains locally, and because there's a train station, you know, less than 2 miles from where I live, so got all kinds of juicy audio there. Trains are great places to get audio, by the way.
Cool.
Even if you're on one. I walked around with my iPhone last year when I was on a trip to Orlando and just recorded hours and hours and hours of ambient train audio and manipulated it into a score I was working on, because it's just so dynamic.
It is such a
great
cool sound. Yeah. I was floored when I heard this track. Like, I was just grinning ear to ear once it started picking up. I was like,
oh, that's
this
so
is
cool to
so exciting.
So cool to hear. And there's actually another Easter egg in this that Wendell probably doesn't even remember me doing this, but there's a section where the train actually goes underground. Now, this was the big attraction when the park opened in the 50s. This was the big, like, oh, we've got a ghost train that goes underground, and it's a big steam, you know, engine. And one of the things that this train does is it actually goes below the park into a series of tunnels, and I hope it plays when you hear the track itself. But when you're in these tunnels, that's when things get really creepy. You've got projections all over the walls, and they're flying. You know, you're flying through this sort of like 3-dimensional space, and then it comes back out, and you're back on top of the park again, and you know, but. For the underground segment, what I thought would be really cool was to actually go back to the music that Wendell did before we were Sideshow and the music that I did before we were Sideshow. So what you actually hear as you go into the tunnel system under the park is Wendell's music from the carnival reversed. Wow. And one of the tracks from my album that predated this one, Three Tales of the Macabre, reversed.
Oh, that's
and sort
awesome.
of mashed together into this weird, So I thought that would be kind of crazy, and you know, again, no one's ever going to pick up on that.
Well, they are now.
Surprise! Yeah, hopefully.
True fans will go through the theme park, record the audio, play it backwards and then post it on the internet. So the truth will get out there eventually. So
Yeah.
the more details you can hide in the structure, like, it's just going to make the fans even more fanatical. So that's great. I love that. Next track, Jungle GBs. And this title made me like laugh out loud when I first heard it. I had never heard the word GBs outside the context of heebie-jeebies. But
Right.
where did the
Again,
title
that's
come
alliteration. If you have heard our podcast, you've heard me say heebie-jeebies about 1,000 times. That's my favorite American English idiom, seriously.
from? It's a great one, and I didn't know if there was a British version where you can just use GBs by itself, but now that I see the alliteration, that makes sense. Jungle
There we
GBs.
go.
Jungle GBs. This is another kind of different atmospheric track that kind of, it's got this vibe of like hidden ruins. It's kind of got an Indiana Jones type of vibe, which I personally am just crazy about. It definitely continues like the kind of mysterious feel, but it feels like you're in a jungle now. It almost reminds me of Uncharted, which is one of my favorite video game series, because it's got this kind of like, chanting parts, and then there's just like the kind of natural jungle sounds as well. And but it maintains the kind of mystery of the rest of the park, the rest of the album.
I'm pretty sure that I came to Will with the name. That sounds like a thing I would do. And then he crafted this really cool instrumentation, especially around this dulcimer. He created this really strong motif that I could, as he often does, that I could just run with and go to town with. Again, this is kind of, half of it is Will's opening, and then the last half is just me coming in and going nuts, and hopefully it works. It was a chance to again include some really cool jungle sounds, like you said, Uncharted. Yeah, that's a good reference.
The end of this gets a little bit crazy. There's like a chase kind of feel to it, and kind of the way that you had envisioned the ride of the Headless Horseman. I feel like my interpretation of this ride would have, basically like an exploration for the beginning, and then it just kind of snaps into a chase, and you have to run all the way back to the beginning of back to the entrance. The chase part at the end really excited me. Did you ever envision what would be the thing that's chasing them, or did you see that as a chase at the end?
Yeah, I certainly saw it as a chase. I mean, there's chases all over this, and I think that comes from just us as composers, loving to play around with rhythm and tempo, just the speed of the track, not necessarily just having a track that plods along. I mean, there's definitely room for that, and there's certainly tracks on this album that use that, but this one, yeah, I mean, it's definitely taking, a leaf. I guess that's the best expression. A leaf out of Jungle Cruise's jungle, because it definitely has to start off very, very slow, but then there's the moment where it's, what's happening? So with this, instead of imagining like a story being told, because I mean, at least the way they have it on Jungle Cruise, it's very kind of tongue-in-cheek. That's what that ride's all about, all the jokes and the puns. And but again, it had to feel sinister for me. When I go to a park, there's a lot of scary roller coasters across the world, with very, very dark, brooding themes, but there's never like a water ride that's scary. You don't get on the rapids and expect a fright, and I'm not saying you should do. I think it's a nice relaxing experience. You don't want to go around Typhoon Lagoon, watching out for your neck. So I think seriously with this one, I always imagined, a boat behind you chasing you, because this is definitely going across the water. And I mean really chasing you, not just it's coming at 2 miles an hour like Terminator, and it's pretty obvious it's never going to reach you. It's really going at it. So the it definitely features a lot of animals, as you can hear on the track. So I imagine this boat not necessarily wanting to chase you, but just kind of drumming up support from these animals and trying to create a stampede that will eventually, cause the capsize of your boat or what have you. So that's how I imagined it, and it's the way it went is totally down to Will's instrumentation, because it gave me a palette to work off of. I could include some wooden blocks and anklungs, these kind of bamboo tubes from Asia, just these really cool sounds and instrumentation that also gives this park, if we are to divide this park into lands, then this would certainly be the main feature of one of them, for sure.
I want to say for the record, Wendell's section on this track is literally my favorite part of the entire album. It's such a fun, insane, just, because I'd written my part, and I was feeling pretty good about my part, and I was just wondering, what is he going to do with it?
Yeah.
And he goes completely off the deep end with it in the best way possible. I mean, I think it's the most fun part of the entire album. I really do. It's just bananas. It's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, for the listener, if you haven't heard this album, you might think that it's going to be just kind of a bunch of amusement park music, because it is music for an amusement park. But there are a lot of really thrilling songs. There's a lot of really fun pieces of this that just made me grin ear to ear and want to just go run around and experience this park, because I don't know, the music is so exciting and adds to the action so much that I can only imagine what the visuals would look like, and it's just great fuel for the imagination on this track in particular. It's awesome, so fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to
Sure.
hear that.
Yeah,
seriously.
I actually hadn't envisioned it as a water ride, which is kind of interesting, but I love that it is a water ride, because then the person, the guest is a lot less powerful. There's a lot less ways they can run because they're stuck on a boat, and
Right,
I feel like in Jungle Cruise and, so many rides, it's the boat doesn't feel like a limitation, but it really is, especially, towards the end of the track when things start to get a little bit crazy. Maybe there's alligators coming out, and they could also start a what's it called, a wave generator going. Maybe the waters are really calm at first,
Whoa,
and then the waves start to get really crazy. And yeah, so I'm picturing the boat would want to be on a track, with a robotic arm holding it so that you don't actually capsize, but you could really choreograph the waves to splash and hit just the perfect angle so that they really send a lot of water up in the air and really feel intense, your boat is really in trouble and you really got to get out of here. You could really add to the action. And yeah, I mean, with kind of Ghost Train going the way that it went, and Ride of the Headless Horseman and Jungle Jeebies, there's a similar arc to the story where I'm okay with this, and then you start to get a little bit scared, and then things just snap and get really wild and you have to get out of there. I really love that vibe, and I think that that's something that would be really exciting for the park guests.
Totally.
It's great. You kind of get the best of both worlds, of the comfort and also the fear, which is something we said at the very beginning of our tour of the park with the park comes to life, how it keeps going. There's kind of creepy, but it's also comforting and goes back and forth. I think that's definitely an overarching theme here. I really love that.
For sure, yeah. But I think with this ride particularly, you touched on something that's kind of very interesting, because the whole jungle scenario, those big giant leaves that you find in rainforests, it gives you the opportunity with the curves and bends in the river to really lug you into that full sense of security and just, build up the suspense and anticipation, this whole idea of what is behind the corner, which is very horror movie vibe in itself. I don't think that's necessarily something that is spoken about a lot about the Jungle Cruise in particular, but at least with Jungle Jeebies, that's definitely what we're going for.
Totally. And a lot of the ride vehicles seem very theme parky when you're going through those kind of scary attractions. You're not walking of your own free will, so it doesn't necessarily feel natural, which kind of takes away from the scariness of it. But if you're on a boat, that's what being on a boat is. You're not in control. You can't just walk wherever you want to or run away if something bad happens. You're stuck on this ride vehicle. So I think that naturally goes with a kind of scary ride, because you're controlling where every single guest is going. I love that. So does the Ghost Train go to the Jungle Jeebies, to this other location where there is a jungle?
Yes, actually it does. That was a discussion that we had. Yeah, it makes stops at all the major attractions that you'd want to visit. So off the rails, it would stop at. It would definitely stop at the Mountains of the Macabre, Chasing Frankenstein, which we'll get to. Yeah, it makes stops at all of them, or at least in the general area.
Right.
Of all of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Does the ghost train go through our next track, the Tunnel of Fear, or is this a water attraction?
This is another water attraction, actually.
That's what I was picturing, kind of the Tunnel of Love, the Tunnel of Fear. It kind of like makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I got that. Yeah.
We just had a conversation today. I'm like, does that play too?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's find out.
Of course. So this track, from my interpretation, kind of has like a slow build to it, and it kind of gives me like a vibe of like reflecting on history for some reason. So this might be an interesting place to kind of tell more story of the park. And then there's a little bit of like a cameo of the music box, which I really appreciated. Like, I don't know if it was direct, musical, like the exact notes and everything, but it was definitely kind of a nod to that, I thought. And I was like, oh, cool. So I'm kind of starting to feel like echoes of kind of these characters of the different parts of the park that we've experienced. If we can kind of treat them as their own character, we're starting to see like, the connections between the different attractions.
That's very well spotted, my friend.
Well, thanks.
That's kind of exactly what we're going for. Well, the thing is, I wrote that intro. I think my intro is only 30 seconds long or something like that, when you took the rest of it and turned it into an amazing piece of music. But I think the only real conversation we had about it was this, and I love that you said Tunnel of Love, because that's exactly what it is. It's a twisted, messed up tunnel of love. But basically, you go in, very slow moving boat ride. There's no drops or anything like that. And it's just creepy. And, there's lights on there. And I kind of imagine shadow play kind of happening as you move through it.
And I think there is a lot of, how can I say this? How can I make this sound as intellectual as my accent suggests? I would say that I think there is a lot of beauty in horror. I think there is some beauty to be found in sadness and scares and misery sometimes as well. I feel like that is what would be portrayed in this ride. It is water in general. When you see like lights around water and the water itself reflecting off the walls of a cavern, it's very beautiful. It would definitely put you in that mood. And at least for the music, it definitely doesn't necessarily take a sinister turn here. This is very much a sigh of relief in the park.
Right. It'd be really cool to have lights shining from underwater onto the ceiling of the cave, so you get that kind of really pretty water reflection pattern, and maybe like green tones or whatever kind of colors you want reflecting all over this cavern. I think that'd be really cool.
You actually just gave me a great idea, because I mentioned that we'd have like shadow play and things like that. And I just imagine that going on all throughout this ride, just creepy shadows, bats,
That's great.
Silhouettes, things like that.
Yeah.
But what if you projected those shadows from under the water where you're talking about with the lights? You know?
That would make it almost more ghostly, where it's kind of like amorphous and it's kind of like shifting around and like hard to really understand what it is. Man, that could be really creepy, actually. Even in a non-water ride, using a filter of water to kind of make the image less clear and more kind of scattered. I think that could be an interesting effect. We'll have to send that to R&D and have them, test some stuff out.
Yeah.
I wanted to include a lot of vocals on this track. I think it's something that a lot of film composers do. Whenever you have this underwater scene in a film, it's usually accompanied by solo female vocals or something like that. So
true.
It's about as soothing as Sideshow is going to get. So sorry if this doesn't soothe you, but we like the scares.
on to our next track here, the Manor March. This is a kind of return to the park for me. That's what it kind of feels like. It feels kind of like almost cheerful, like you're excited and things are coming back to life. Not that they had died before. We've been through all this excitement in the last several tracks, but it's kind of got certain vibes like the park comes to life back on track 2.
Well, this is one that I came up with. This was very, very wacky. One of the things that I really wanted to have our park contain is an actual marching band.
Cool.
I just thought, there's got to be some kind of live musical element. And I love the idea that there was a piece of music that was written about the manor itself. Because one thing we haven't mentioned is, the park icon is a real castle, Castle Offenstein, which plays into the history of Greenhill Point and all that stuff. And so I thought there should be a march that's played throughout the day where, the marching band comes in. And so I wrote this little march, and then I tried to design, do sound design on it that made it sound like you were in the space hearing them kind of off to your left.
That's awesome.
And then it kind of goes from diegetic to non-diegetic and kind of melts into a full, audio experience, and you hear the rest of the piece of music as if you weren't there, you were actually in the music. So I'm not sure if it plays. I hope it does. It's a weird one, but
I was actually just about to ask about that, because this is the first time that the Manor has been named on the album specifically, and that's always something that really intrigued me about the album artwork. Is over there in front of like the silhouette of the Manor itself. It's like that is what immediately drew my attention when I first saw the album art. I was like, wow, this looks awesome, and the album's called Greenhill Manor, and so this is actually a castle that you guys have come up with a backstory for. That's really cool.
Oh yes, we introduced it on our first album, actually, in the track "Storm the Castle," and
wow.
Yeah, so it just a brief history of it. It was basically a place where he was doing some things that upset the villagers some 300 years ago, and they stormed his castle and burnt it to the ground. But the saying goes, well, there's a children's rhyme that was made up about him. They burned his castle to the ground, but his body was never found. So he disappeared. He was not amidst the rubble and the fallen castle. In the 1800s, they rebuilt the castle for historical purposes. And then when Carl Ellersby bought the property, he actually refurbished it and made sure that it was as it appeared in the 1700s. And it is basically the park icon, as well as really being the biggest tourist attraction in Greenhill Point.
Yeah, I love that it's got an actual historical value to it. It's not just a logo for a theme park or for Disney's castle. It's like, what if Disney's castle was actually a castle back in the day? That'd be really fascinating.
It's awesome, yeah. It's right there on the first album cover too. You can see that castle. It's exactly the same one, and it's so high as well. It really is the centerpiece of the park. It's it's a little off to the right. If you look at the artwork in general, you can definitely see the track titles. You've got the creepy carousel there to the left. You've got the Tunnel of Fear to the far left. You've got Jungle Jeebies close to the palm trees on the right. It's all there. So, yeah.
It's all thought out. I love that. You guys have done great with this whole project. It's awesome.
This is actually based on a movie that exists in our universe called Chasing Frankenstein. And I'll let Wendell explain what that movie's about and what this ride's about.
Please do.
Yeah, well, it's exactly that. I definitely wanted this this ride with Frankenstein because, I think the idea for the Frankendine restaurant came before this. And then we had meetings and discussions and kind of formed this, specific ride that is based on a movie, like Will mentioned. This ride is one of those rides that starts off with a ride vehicle going forwards, and then when it descends into the madness, it quickly turns backwards. And what you are seeing is the ride vehicle is pushing you from left to right. Basically, it's just chasing Frankenstein around the world. And you can definitely hear that through the music. You know, you are hearing, to give all the countries a mention, you know, he is being chased through France. He then goes to Russia, America, specifically the Midwest with the banjos, then to the Middle East, through Asia, and ending in India. So it is right around the world, and I imagine it quite comical. I imagine you constantly following an audio animatronic figure going through all these different countries, and on the way collecting things from these countries. So as he's running maniacally through the Middle East, you know, maybe a fez hat falls on his head. When he's running through the Midwest, you know, maybe he gets caught up in banjo strings. You know, when he's running through France, he I don't know, spoils a lovely romantic couple's dinner in front of the Eiffel Tower. So that, I imagined it quite comical, and I don't know if that comes across, but it's kind of less sinister and more just watching the exploits of this chase happen and the ride vehicle moving to show you this story. It's not necessarily complex, but it's taking you through all these different areas, and kind of it's a small world in a more fun way.
And I do want to. I just one very important story note that I feel we should mention is this movie within our universe is not to be taken seriously.
Oh no, no.
It's one of those. You know, this is probably the dumbest idea any movie producer's ever come up with. You know, a movie called Chasing Frankenstein, and that's the point. You know, and so. It's just one of those cash grabby sort of, we've got this character and we can, you know, use him or whatever, and so that's that's the film. It's not a good film. It's not to be taken seriously, but this is, you know, that's why we call it Chasing Frankenstein, the ride. You know,
right? It's like a cash in on a movie.
Yeah, not to be. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fun. And literally, the things I have written down are travel dash lots of types of music, cartoon carnival. Like it definitely feels more comical and cartoony. And I'm glad to hear it was part of an attraction, because I was like, this track doesn't quite seem to fit if it's just being broadcast in the overall park. It's like, well, all these other songs like have this really kind of cool, prestigious, almost like horror, like creepy comfort to them. And then there's this one song that's like sounds almost like a cartoon version of that, and that sounds like what you're going for. You know, it's like a happier version of the whole vibe of the park. You know, it's like, what if it's almost like making fun of itself in a way. You know, it's got these like
very self-aware.
Yeah, self-aware. It's got a creepy character in Frankenstein, but he's just kind of running around being a goofball, and I love that. It's a fun change of pace, and you know, something for the young ones. So that sounds great. So we are moving right along to lucky number 13, Scary Stories Saloon. And as you kind of mentioned earlier, this is a nod to another album. That's awesome. This one definitely sounds more kind of Western. There's a lot of sort of ghost sounds and gunshots. And I could kind of envision a really neat, you know, animatronic-filled saloon for this one if you wanted to, you know, have it as an actual dining attraction.
You picked up on that.
Yeah, definitely. I imagined it as just a place you kind of walk through and look at, but if you can actually eat in there, that'd be wild. I would just be scared of stray bullets flying past me, you know.
Well, what's interesting is what you're hearing is on one side of the dining room there's a cowboy with a pistol, and on the other side there is an explorer with a whip. And they're sort of at odds with each other. But in the middle of this is the dining room where you eat. And every 30 seconds or so, you hear this whoosh, and then you hear the cowboy returning fire. And it's, you know, and it's. I imagine them both to be the most primitive audio animatronic figures you've ever seen in your life. Like nothing that's ever going to impress you at all. But
yeah, I like the kind of creepy animatronic vibe where it's almost like a skeleton that's not properly animated, or like kind of a Five Nights at Freddy's kind of vibe where animatronics can get really kind of creepy really quickly if they don't work quite properly. And then also they appeal to the, kind of classic vintage theme park fans. It's like, oh, I remember when all the animatronics used to look that bad.
Yeah.
The crowd being in the middle and like not knowing which way to face because, it's a battle going back and forth. It'd be kind of exciting to try to eat underneath that, where you've got these, big scary characters on either side of the restaurant, and they're having this huge back and forth, and you're kind of caught in the middle of it.
Yeah, and I envision that this place has existed from day one. So the audio animatronics are, Mark 1, terrible. No one's ever thought to like refurb them, like the paint's coming off. It's just.
Well, we could totally have like an audio animatronics graveyard, just like people with like blood spurting out and just broken toys.
Cool. So the next track, 14, Pumpkin Patch Pavilion. It's kind of got like a almost ballet kind of feel where it's like, it seems to be telling a story, and it's just a comfortable kind of place to be. I see this as a pavilion, a place where you can kind of stroll around or take a rest. And it seems like a comfortable place, and I like the name a lot of the Pumpkin Patch Pavilion. And maybe this would be where we have the jack-o'-lantern carving contest.
Funny you mentioned that, actually. When I wrote this, I was thinking of this place as basically fall personified.
Wow.
So
cool.
Everything that you love about fall, I know we're getting into crazy white people territory, pumpkin spice lattes and, and all that stuff, but, this area is dripping with that sort of vibe. It's the whole place smells like pumpkin spice, and then, there's probably even a Starbucks there. I don't even know.
No way. Not in our park.
Okay, well we've got our own pumpkin spice lattes going on, and I love the idea that this would be where the in fact on our last album, they landed on Halloween. Which is set in 1955, 1 year after this park opens. We are at this park 1 year after it opens, and we actually have a couple scenes in there. And one of the things that you hear the announcer say is the annual pumpkin carving contest will begin shortly or whatever.
Oh, cool.
And so I've always imagined that this is where that takes place, the Pumpkin Patch Pavilion.
Dance of the Jack-o'-lanterns.
Well, this is a show that I envision taking place in the Pumpkin Patch Pavilion every night, and you'd have these really elaborately set up sort of visuals where you'd have a combination of water effects, light effects, animatronics, screens, all kinds of things that would actually show you these pumpkins, these jack-o'-lanterns coming to life and dancing, being synchronized with music. And that was basically what I thought when I wrote it, when I wrote the piece of music for this track, that it was just this fun little show. And, you'd ideally see it at nighttime when there are no other lights on except for, the lights coming out of the jack-o'-lanterns, and just imagine the crazy stuff you could do,
Yeah, I love that kind of vibe of having just candlelight or simulated candlelight coming out of the faces of these characters. That's a really cool vibe.
Yeah.
I for some reason was picturing this like during the day, but I think doing it at night really, really sets it off correctly. That sounds amazing. And we could do a simulated candle that can switch between all the colors of the rainbow, so you could have them instantly change, all the same color, or kind of like do the wave of switching colors across the whole area with all these like dozens of jack-o'-lanterns changing colors in time with the music or the stage show, whatever needs to be done as far as the story of this performance goes. But that'd be really exciting to have them be able to change colors instead of just being the natural candlelight that we're so comfortable with. That's again that kind of mix of comforting because it's a candle at nighttime, versus creepy because it's a scary face looking at you. You know, we can kind of take that to the next level, or a modern interpretation of that.
I think that everyone that works at the park, everyone has to be in character, meaning, you know, they are kind of like the ghost hosts at Haunted Mansion, you know, they don't break from it, you know. I'm not necessarily saying they'd be gloomy and depressed, because this is a very fun and joyous park as well.
I think that would make the job so much more fun for a lot of people. You know, a certain type of personality might not like it, but in general, you know, if you want to work in this kind of environment, like, give the employees the ability to really act and get into character and take their role as seriously or as, you know, kind of goofily as they want to. So I think empowering them to do that.
I mean, they do it at the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's
and it kind of like Jungle Cruise, where, you know, they could kind of come up with their own like jokes and their own kind of like story of it. I think that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, because while there is a strong focus, you know, that creative license is so important. You know, having a creative team and throwing out ideas.
Giving the employees the chance to do that every single day, I think that'd be awesome. And, you know, as someone who's worked in a lot of kind of peon level jobs, giving, you know, if someone had been like, oh, you can wear this crazy hat and really go crazy if you want to, I would totally do that. You know, I love empowering the employees to really push the envelope and, you know, make somebody's day every day. Like, I think that'd be fascinating. It'd be really fun.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. So, hold on to your hats, because we're about to go off the rails with number 16, off the rails, exclamation points. Yeah, this is a really exciting one. I wrote down escalating polka. It's kind of goes from slow to fast and then slow again, and it's got this kind of like ominous pulse to it. I was just wide-eyed listening to this track. It was like, whoa, I did not see this coming. It's so exciting. And so yeah, you said this was one of the attractions that was there at the 2009 opening. Is that correct?
It was right before it closed for investigation and safety and all that. This was the cause. This was the thrill of all thrill rides. I am not a big roller coaster guy.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
which is strange, because I love theme parks and spend a lot of time talking about
right.
them on various shows and spend a lot of money going to them. But I am not I'm not a roller coaster. Not a fan of going upside down. And in my mind, when Wendell and I sat down with this, I was like, you know what? This needs to be this needs to be so scary. There's no way you could ever pay me to be on it. You know? Which the music doesn't really tell you, you know, so much.
Knowing me, and I guess I do, I think that this is definitely one where the track name came before the track title. You know, obviously we definitely had to have a roller coaster, and again, it's right there on the left of the album artwork. But, you know, Off the Rails, again, I mean, that is just, you know, Off the Rails. Speaking of a descent into madness, this was actually envisioned as one of the, even though it's track 16, one of the very first tracks. It's one of the very first pieces of music I wrote. And Will was like, no, we can do so much more with this. And that we did. But it also led to this idea of having just more sounds on the album, because I had these people screaming and these laughs. I had that typical kind of attraction siren sound, you know, and the closing of the doors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a roller coaster that very much is kind of in and out of buildings. It's going all over the place, taking you everywhere, you know?
Yeah. And like the Jungle GB's track, when I take over, that's when the ride shifts gears completely. Because in Wendell's section, it's very much a carnival kind of fun sort of, you know, traditional sense of a carnival ride. When I take over, that's when the ride gets to the point where I would never ride it if you paid me $1 million. Why is it called Off the Rails? Well, because it literally goes off the track.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I mean, it's I'm not sure how you do it. I'm not an Imagineer, but you would, at speed, literally be launched off the track.
Oh, man.
And seem to be in free fall and corkscrew and all that stuff. And and I just, and what's great is, as a composer, I scored it as though I was scoring an actual roller coaster. I was scoring the loops and the drops and the crazy stuff. So it was really a lot like writing an action cue, and I really enjoyed that.
I'm sure that the roller coaster would be really fun to design as well, where you need it to look like it's chaotic and out of control, but of course it's designed and it's safe and everything. Then there was this, is the title of the track. And this one, in my opinion, was kind of a mellow ending, but it's still mysterious. It maintains the overall vibe of the album. What exactly is this? What is your interpretation of this?
I have to choose my words carefully because this is something that will be revealed in the future.
Wow.
We're getting back into the diegetic, non-diegetic thing where this is now the closing scene of a movie, essentially. Yeah. So we're kind of out of park audio and back into the story or the end of the story. And the only thing I can really say without giving too much away is that this is basically the Oz behind the curtain moment of this story. And that what happens in this track plays a very important role in a future album.
So that's the album, and we got a little bit of a teaser for the next one. I'm so excited about that now. Is there a place where fans can kind of read the story behind these parks, or is it something that you kind of have to get from the titles of the tracks and from listening for little Easter eggs within the tracks themselves?
Well, what we're doing right now, this is the year, we've been planning it for a long time, but we are going to be rolling out the entire world through different forms of media. So we're currently actually writing short novellas to accompany each album.
Yes.
And so we're gonna be fleshing out the story, because the thing is, when you've only got the music and the track titles and the artwork, you can do a lot with that, but there's so much more story that we want to tell. So we're definitely going to be rolling that out this year. We're going to be doing a lot more visual media. We're trying to collaborate with different people who are interested in the story and really want to help us tell it. And so there'll be ways we're doing that. Our website's going to be completely overhauled to include a lot of interactive elements that'll allow you to look at the maps of Greenhill Point and the different posters for attractions. I mean, we're literally going crazy to flesh this world out. So yeah, it's all in the works.
I'm just so excited. That's great. I mean, I love this album, and seeing it tie into a larger narrative. It's thrilling. I'm so pumped now. That's great.
That's awesome.
Before we go, I was going to give you guys my interpretation of what I thought Greenhill Manor would be like.
Please, we want to hear this. Yes.
Sure. So I, didn't know a ton about the backstory as far as Castle Offenstein and all of that stuff. So it was pretty much just this album as an island, like its own thing. I have the track titles and I have the audio itself, and I kind of have taken those tracks into my interpretation of this. And I was imagining it like as the whole album taking place inside of the manor. And I know that's not necessarily the intent. And I did get the vibe of we're obviously in an outdoor space on the first few tracks. But I was like, what if we interpret this whole thing as a next generation haunted house? The first few tracks is kind of you're entering the foyer and you're seeing kind of shadows on the walls and just kind of the general creepiness of an attraction like that. But then kind of over time you get to explore the different rooms, and there's this whole tragic backstory of the family that lived there. And of course everyone died, as always happens in these things. And you can go into each person's room, and then the rooms are kind of really unusual in the fact that they're kind of surreal. And so, for example, the ghost train I had interpreted as kind of like an older gentleman's, his room. And so it's, a lot of wood and kind of really nice things that you might find on an old fashioned train, but it's just, it's just a bedroom, nothing too crazy. But once everyone, you're in a small group and you go, there's specific areas you need to go to on the opposite side of the room. So you're on the far side of the room where there's a desk and there's a kind of like a bed, a small bed. And once everyone's on that side of the room, this weird thing starts to happen where there is suddenly a seam halfway down the room. So you're all the way on the far side. So the seam is kind of blocking you off from the door from whence you came. And so from the seam, there's walls that start to come in to close you off. And it's basically cutting the room in half. So it's half the size all of a sudden. Oh. And then at the same time, another partition starts to come off and cut off the area that had the desk and the seat versus the area that had the bed. And it actually forms train cars, like a sleeping car on one end and a, just kind of seating car on the other end. And basically more furniture kind of slides out of the walls, and then the walls on the side drop down, and you realize that you are inside of a train. And this room actually was just a train parked there, like totally camouflaged in. And so now you're suddenly on a train, and the train starts moving, and it's basically like half of this room has just departed from the house. And it's no longer part of the manor. It's actually this train that just matches the theming perfectly with this, older gentleman's room. And so basically you're like going through his memories, or, his highest point of his life was this train journey where, he fell in love or whatever kind of backstory you want. And so he's kind of themed his whole bedroom, his whole like space in this home to kind of match and kind of vibe with his, sunny memories of the past on this train. And that was the kind of vibe I had there, with this like surreal transformation.
That's incredible. I like that.
That's such a cool idea.
So cool for a character. Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that one's probably impossible to do unless you have very specific areas. Like everyone has to sit down in these specific seats and like put a seatbelt on, and then the room can start to kind of transform around you. But that was something that was kind of going through my mind as I was listening to that track. And that's just kind of what I was seeing in my head. And another one I was thinking of was having someone who was kind of an explorer. I know that's kind of an archetype of early 20th century or late 1800s, the safari type of person, like someone who's been on explorations of, Africa and stuff. And so they've got some kind of tribal like trophies and things mounted to their walls. And basically when you enter the room, there's only a small light right by when you first enter. So the end of the room is in darkness. And there's actually a curtain there. We can't see it, but it's a curtain. So it doesn't sound like anything crazy. It just sounds like you're in a bedroom. But then once you start walking towards that far wall that's totally pitch black, the curtain lifts and it suddenly starts to feel like you're in a bigger space. And then you can you turn on the lights and you find that the pattern on the wallpaper extends through this big hole. Basically, the far wall is just totally gone. It's just totally open. And there's actually a hill. It goes downhill like maybe 20 feet. You're on a grassy hill, and then down you can find this kind of trail that leads into the jungle, and it's all indoors, of course. And so the actual ceiling, as you're walking down this grass-covered hill, the ceiling still matches the ceiling decoration and the same kind of light bulbs that were in the bedroom, and it's kind of surreal melting between whoever lived in this room, their decor in the room, and their favorite memory from their life when they had this exciting expedition through the jungle. So the jungle is actually inside the house. It's a part of this manor where you're kind of walking into this person's like memory palace, like their favorite things from their memory that they kind of retrace again and again. You get to go on that same journey. And then something starts to chase you and you have to run all the way back to the house. You run back up the hill and suddenly you're back in the bedroom again, and you can go back out in the hallway and close it, and that whole jungle adventure is behind you.
Very cool. It's like a mix and match between Jumanji and a little bit of Up and Sideshow, of course. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that idea, and I love the idea of bringing the outside world into the inside world. I think that's neat. I think you could play around with a lot of those ideas, which you have. It's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and trying to interpret this album as happening within a haunted house context, I was like, this is such a fascinating thing that's really pushing my imagination. And I had such a fun thrill trying to think of that and how you can kind of combine specific things from the soundtrack into this one home. And I was like, well, it doesn't necessarily make sense. So maybe we need to do a little bit of travel into people's memories or, different things that aren't necessarily actually indoor to the house, but it kind of all connects together. Cool. So So where exactly would we go to kind of follow up on this and kind of track the next album and the one after that and the whole Greenhill saga?
Yeah, you go straight to SideshowSoundTheatre.com. You will find all the links there. We have a specific page dedicated to all of these albums. Each one has a separate page. Like I said, you can definitely stream it there. And what I would also recommend people do is, if you like what you hear and you want to hear more, I really encourage you to comment, share our content, go onto the website, leave some comments, tell us your favorite track, tell us what you're looking forward to on future albums from what we've said here today. And get behind it, because we are not going anywhere. This is a Halloween album every year until we rest in peace.
And maybe afterwards.
Oh, that's great. And I love just, supporting people like you guys who are creators with such great imagination, and just you're using, your personal skills and the things you have access to, your technology and your contacts to just make it happen. You're just doers. Like, I love that. It's such a cool narrative that you guys have come up with, and you're doing everything yourself. It's awesome. It's such a cool, entrepreneurial spirit. There's a lot to be valued about that.
Oh, thanks, man.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was wonderful. I really, really enjoyed this.